Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I'm Senior Researcher for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update of what is happening in our state legislature. It is now the 41st day of session, and actually maybe the 42nd day of session. I might have miscounted there, of our 105-day session, and the legislature is grinding through hundreds of bills in committee at this point in the House and the Senate. The first cutoff date for legislation just happened on Friday, on February 21st, and that was for policy bills to pass the committee in their House of origin. The next cutoff date is for fiscal bills, and that's in a week, coming up on February 28th. And then farther down the road is another cutoff date on March 12th, and that is for bills to pass in their House of origin. Again, always remembering two things about the process. One is fiscal and budget bills go on a slightly different track and are given more time. And also that no bill is really gone until the legislature adjourns. The leadership can always reach back and take a bill and bring it up at the end of the session and possibly vote on it then, or else roll it into either the budget or another larger bill. So nothing is really quite dead until we get to the end of the session. But for the moment, the vast majority of bills are subject to this cutoff deadline. Having said that, I'm going to touch on 4 or 5 really top issues that we've been tracking that we think are important to people in the state. And before I get to that, let me, of course, remind all of our viewers to please like and subscribe to our channel, share our videos. We are very big on trying to connect directly with the public in Washington state to tell people about issues that are important to them. We have some lingering respect for traditional media. We're happy to work with them, but we do not want to face filters and gatekeepers who are preventing people from getting information that we think they should hear. So direct connection is important to us. So please like and subscribe to our channel. I will point out that since the start of this year, in just 6 weeks, we have tripled the number of subscribers to our channel, and we're hoping that that growth continues. And also thanks to everyone for watching our videos. Now on to the issues. First one is SB 5181, the Parental Rights Bill. It was passed out of the Senate, so it's made its committee deadline and its House of Origin deadline. It passed on a strict party line vote. 30 Democrats voted for it, 19 Republicans voted against it. And it was sent to the House Committee on Education, and then so the House will take up this Senate bill. The reason this is so controversial is because it's reopening an issue that the legislature dealt with last year in passing Initiative 2081, which was the Parental Rights Initiative. And what that did was empower parents to get information about their own students from local schools regarding medical issues, academic issues, discipline, mental health, all of the things that parents worry about with their own children and definitely want to be notified. I mean, think about it. If a neighbor knew something about your child that he thought you should know, he would tell you. And most parents want the public schools to provide them with the same open and honest communication. That's what the Parental Rights Initiative did last year. It passed on a bipartisan vote. Democrats and Republicans voted for it. It got 452,000 signatures from the voters in order to send it to the legislature. And of course, the thinking that we heard last year, and I heard this from a Democratic lawmaker kind of behind the scenes, which was they did not want this issue the parental rights issue to be part of the election in 2024. So in the spring of that year, the legislature just passed it. And the idea was just get it off the table, enact the thing, give parents what they want, build confidence in our public schools. And I think everybody thought that issue had been taken care of. And here comes SB 5181 is now rolling back the protections that were provided in that bill originally, in that initiative rather. And Senator Pedersen has hit some, who's pushing this bill very hard. Even though he voted for the initiative last year, now he's voting for the bill that would open up the Parents' Rights Initiative and roll back some of those protections. He made some national news in a Fox News interview in which he basically said kids over the age of 13 have a right to make their own decisions about their mental health. Parents do not have a right to have notice. They do not have a right to have consent about that. Now, Senator Pedersen quickly came back with a correction saying that he was that was out of context, that doesn't accurately reflect his views. So we want to take into account what the senator's direct communication is. We want to hear directly from him. But the dynamic is that this interview really upset a lot of people. And as I say, hit the national debate and brought some unwanted attention, I'll say, to Washington State. So that's the process that's going on. The other thing that I, as a policy analyst, am interested in is what is the reasoning of the sponsors? Why are they opening up this issue after it had already been settled in a bipartisan way last year? So it's always important to listen to what the proponents of an idea have to say. What they say is that this bill is not rolling back the Parental Rights Initiative, that it is clarifying the law. They describe it as a cleanup bill. And so there, it's like we're tweaking it to make it better, and school districts are confused, and we're just trying to implement this better. I'm not sure if I really buy that based on their actions, but the more logical question is, well, wasn't it clear last year when you voted for it? I mean, why would you vote for something that needs a, quote, cleanup bill later on? So that's suspicious reasoning right there. What's more likely is commonly what happens is that lawmakers will vote for something when the public is really pushing for it. And then when people aren't paying attention so much, maybe a year or two later, they'll start to amend it and roll it back. That frequently happens. I call this the philosophy of no issue is over until we win. And so the Democrats seem to be taking that approach to this bill. The larger issue is we hear constantly about how we need to defend our democracy, how conservatives and people on the right are threats to democracy. We've heard that for years. And yet here is the more left-wing party is opening up an issue that had been settled. What that does is undermine trust in our institutions. It makes people suspicious of what public figures say, to not believe them. It definitely undermines the partnership that parents are supposed to have with educators in public schools. I also think this is events like this are a major driver behind school choice across the country. We don't have that in Washington State, except to a limited extent. We have some charter schools, but other states are going big time into school choice. And I think it is because lawmakers in those states are sensitive to parents who want to have a more direct role in the education of their children. So, public schools, I think, and this is from OSPI, Superintendent Reichdahl at the high state level, all the way down to the local school district. The entire system sends a message institutionally to parents, which is like, we don't really trust you. We think that you parents are the enemy when it comes to your kid. And there's nothing that drives parents more crazy than that. As a parent of 4 kids myself, I can tell you that you go to bed every night thinking, where are my kids? How are they doing? And how can I help them succeed? If the local public school doesn't want to be a partner in that, then you can completely understand why families are wanting to make other choices, get out of the system, and access a better education in a different way. So as I mentioned, that bill passed the Senate on a partisan vote. It is now in the House. We'll see what happens next with that. The next issue is falls under a category I call they're not listening. And that is an incident that happened last Thursday in the House Housing Committee. And that was in hearing room C, and they were in a morning session, and the committee was debating a number of bills. They had 4 bills up, and they were going through amendments that were being offered by committee members. Some of these members were Republicans. Granted, the Republicans understand that they may be outvoted in committee. They're in the minority. They get that. But they do have a right to offer their ideas and explain them. And on 2 occasions, the chairman of the committee, Democrat from Tacoma, I believe, Chairman Strom Peterson, he cut off the microphone of a Republican member. I had to check this out myself on TVW. So the TVW hearing at the 39-minute mark and the 47-minute mark, both times the chairman cuts off the microphone of a member of the committee saying, you've talked too long, you're using up time, we're not going to listen to you. And he just bulldozes ahead with the committee hearing after that. So that made Republicans upset, as you would expect. The chairman's basic attitude was, we're out of time. And yet, at that same hearing, he added extra time to that meeting because there were a couple of bills that he hadn't gotten to yet. And then he also scheduled a rare evening meeting of the same committee on Thursday night because he still didn't get to two bills. So he was having a problem with time management, definitely, but also not listening to what the other side said. Not surprisingly, Republicans did not show up at that evening meeting. So it's odd to watch a committee working where there are 10 Democrats occupying some chairs, and then there's a row of empty chairs right next to them. The two bills that they were considering, guess what? They passed by 10-0. But to have roll call votes on a committee that come out 10-0 when there are 17 members of the committee shows that there isn't equal participation. And again, I don't think the majority, the chairman, was listening to the other side, giving them a chance to talk about their ideas. Chairman Peterson has a history of this. In January, he also cut off public testimony on a controversial rent control bill for the same reason. We don't have time to listen to you. And this was to members of the public who had waited all through the session, all through the hearing rather, in order to state their piece. I think this is, again, another reason why the public lacks trust in some of the actions that our lawmakers take. On a more positive note, however, I did hear from more conservative members, believe it or not, that Representative Lauren Davis, she is a Democrat from Shoreline, has introduced a couple of really solid public safety bills. These are completely common sense. I went and checked these out myself, and the rumors were true. She had introduced some really good ideas. Here's a couple of them. HB 1334. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong bill number. Let me get the right one here. HB 1252 would require judges to explain in writing why they were releasing an offender after a pretrial hearing if that offender had either resisted arrest, engaged in a car chase with police, had fought the police. And although everyone is innocent until proven guilty, when there is reasonable cause that a person could be a danger to the community, they should probably be detained until their trial comes up. Now, judges can release that person, and they often do. But what this bill would do, that Representative Davis has introduced, is the judge would have to explain to the public why he or she is releasing this person into the community. Another one of her common sense bills is HB 1487. This would provide more funding for the victims of crime services. This is when my wife and I have worked with foster kids, we have used the victim of crime services. We're familiar with the system. We're glad that it is receiving more funding through this bill, if it's passed. And what struck me about it is that Representative Travis Couture, one of the more conservative members of the legislature, has signed on to this bill. So that is a good example of how members can work together. It's a Democrat-sponsored bill. Republicans are signing on to it. And if you just look at it objectively, when you read the bill, it makes perfect sense. So I think those bills should get more attention. Right now, both of those are in committee. There doesn't appear to be any action on them, but we'll hope that leadership gives them a look. And if only for the symbolic purpose of passing a bipartisan bill to show that all members can come together and support something that's good for the community. So now on to that bill I mentioned earlier, HB 1334, that would triple the property tax growth cap from 1%. That's a voter enacted limit, and this bill would increase that to 3%, so it's triple. And another bill, HB 1921, that is the mileage tax bill, sort of infamously, people are hearing about that. That would put 2.6 cents per mile tax on drivers. The reason I bring up both of those bills is because this is a case of democracy in action. People have signed on to testify on these bills, and the data comes back that you work the percentages, and on the triple the property tax growth cap bill, 1% signed up in favor of the bill, and 98.5% of people signed up against it. That was thousands of people across the state indicated their preference online. You'll notice that doesn't add up to 100, so I checked it out. 46 people signed in as other. I'm not sure how you would not have an opinion on this issue, but I respect everybody's views, even if they don't have any. So some people signed up that way. And the same thing is true on HB 1921, the mileage tax bill. 1.0% of people signed up pro, and 98.75% of people signed up against it. So that is a very clear signal to the legislators that there's this informal poll, but these are real Washington state residents across the country, across the state. They are indicating their preference on these bills. We have not had this dynamic in the past where there is measurable public sentiment and how people feel about bills. There have been calls, letters, emails, demonstrations. Those kinds of activities have existed for a long time about how the public can have their voice heard. But in this case, being able to go online, click on a bill, express your preference when a hearing is coming up is something we haven't had before. And as a researcher, I find that to be really useful to get the mood of the public on these ideas. Two more ideas I'll go over real quickly. One is HB 1785. This is the perennial wealth tax that has been proposed and defeated many over the years. This is introduced by Representative Doglio, Democrat from Olympia, and the sponsor of this bill say that they want to tax the excessive compensation that some CEOs and executives received. I'm always a little worried when people in powerful positions in government announce that they think that someone else is too successful, somebody's making too much money. It makes you worry about, well, will a day come when you think I'm making too much money, no matter how modest it is? So these terms like excessive compensation are a red flag that the government is chasing somebody down and thinks that they don't deserve what they have. That's basically what it comes down to. It's a reasoning that's based on envy. I think it's also driven by greed of people in government. They see large pots of private money and wonder how they can get hold of it. The coverage that I saw in the Washington State Observer said that rich CEOs might have to give the state a cut of their compensation. So again, this looks pretty authoritarian. It's like, we've decided you have too much money, we're going to take some of it. That's just an attitude that is a concern in government. This has been put in the Senate Finance Committee. No action has been taken on it yet. It is a fiscal related bill, however, so the deadline for that is later on. And then last point, which I've already mentioned in the past, is if you look at the budget and revenue, which is rising for the state doesn't need the money. Jay Inslee added 22 new taxes. We have a capital gains income tax now. And it just shows the grasping and kind of avaricious attitude of some people in government that there's no amount of money that's enough for them. They are constantly looking across civil society to try to find ways, large and small, to just wring more dollars out of people. That's what it boils down to. The irony is that at the federal level, there's a massive efficiency process going on that is saving billions of dollars in the federal budget. And just a few days ago, the idea was floated that, well, maybe Americans would get $5,000 back on their taxes, some kind of rebate. It would be sort of grimly comical if Washington State raised taxes by about $5,000 per person, and that would wipe out whatever savings there would be from the federal government. This is all conceptual, so we will see what happens. The wealth tax bill, HB 1785, is still in committee, and we're waiting to see if it moves this year. As I mentioned, it has been defeated in the past. Last issue, which is causing a lot of buzz across the state, is HB 1938. This is a bill introduced by 3 Democrat members, and it would take George Washington off of the state flag. It sets up a commission. It creates this usual slow grinding process of 2 years and public input and blah, blah, blah. But when you get to the bottom line on the bill, it would take George Washington off the state flag. The sponsors say that George Washington doesn't fit with our evolving identity. That's a quote from them. They say that the design is uninspiring. I think a lot of people would disagree with that. It's really about what their approach is erasing part of our state's history. George Washington, of course, has been identified with our state since it was a territory. The symbolism of the Great Seal of the state and the flag were done early in the 1900s. So we've had this for a long time. I also think there's a not too subtle message about conveying shame about our past, making people feel like they don't want to be associated with George Washington. And I think a lot of people don't feel that way. I know myself, if you read the life of George Washington, that virtually every civil freedom that we have, the democracy itself that we have, is due to George Washington and the founding generation. He had 3 chances to become a dictator or a king, and he turned them down every time. He voluntarily left the presidency after 2 terms, setting a precedent that has lasted even up to the current day. So what I like to think of is, if you like freedom, thank George Washington. Virtually every benefit that we have as Americans come from his leadership and sacrifice when our country was founded. And if you look back at the history of the 18th century, that was not common in the world, and we very easily could have lost the benefits of our Constitution and our democracy. So that's just a standard civil rights lesson that you think would be common, particularly with elected members of the legislature. But a lot of them apparently would rather take George Washington off the flag. And I think that would lead to a question about, are we renaming the state? Is the University of Washington going to be called something else? Again, I think that's based on embarrassment and shame about our past, when really we should be proud about what's been accomplished and how we benefit from it today. So I will wrap up there. That bill, by the way, I should say, is in the State Government and Tribal Relations Committee. It had a hearing, but it hasn't been moved yet, so we'll see whether it makes those cutoff deadlines that I mentioned. And with that, I'll wrap up, and I'll be back in the future with another update. Thank you.